So, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our audience with Glenda Young. Before we start, can you please make sure that you've got your cameras turned off and also that you are on mute? And if you could keep those settings throughout the duration of the talk, that would be absolutely brilliant. We have a chat facility, so if you do have any problems, if you want to type them in there, and we have the wonderful Tom on tech support today. And also, if you have any questions for Glenda, if you those in the chat facility, and we have a prize for the best question, which is a signed copy of the Paper Mill Girls, and we will judge that at the end of the and if you've left the session, unfortunately your question doesn't count, so you have to stop here to the end, which is great, but I'm sure you will close. Glenda's absolutely fabulous. So a little bit about Glenda. She credits her local library in the village of Riot, where she grew up, for giving her a love of books, and we love people that love libraries, Glenda. She still lives close by in Sunderland and often gets her ideas for her stories on long bike rides along the coast. A lifelong Coronation Street, she runs 2 hugely popular fan websites. So just before we start, I've noticed a couple of you still got your cameras on, so if you could please switch those off for me, that would be brilliant. So, Glenda, first question, can you tell us a little bit about your writing journey?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you very much indeed to Pauline and everybody at The Word, and for Tom, who's in the background looking after all of the tech stuff. So thank you very much indeed for having me. And hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. So a little bit about me. I've always loved writing ever since I was a child. I always used to write poems and stories, and then didn't have a clue what to do with them. So I used to store them away at the back of my knicker drawer. Always loved writing growing up and through school. But, you know, growing up in a pit village in the northeast and living on a council estate, being a writer it didn't enter my mind that I could do this for a living. It just was something that somebody else did, you know, posh people did. So I went through school, left school at 15, went straight into work, worked pretty much for the next 40 odd years in different jobs, mainly in universities. And all the time that I was working, I always had this burning desire to write. I just wanted to create my own fiction. And I never really got the chance because I was working hard and paying mortgages and paying the bills and what have you. And parallel to all of this, when I was growing up, I was a huge Coronation Street fan, and I still am. And when I got online, the first 2 words I ever typed into the internet were Coronation Street. And from there, I started writing Corrie weekly updates that went all over the world. ITV got in touch with me and asked me to update one of their official books. So as a fan, that was just the most amazing experience. So I ended up writing updating 2 Coronation Street books for them. And then when the character of the actress Anne Kirkbride, who played Deirdre Barlow, when she passed away 5 years ago, ITV got in touch with me and asked me to write the official tribute book to the character of Deirdre Barlow. So that was a huge privilege. But all the time that I was writing the Corrie books, I just kept thinking, I really want to make my own fiction and create my own wonderful women and give them as much drama as Deirdre Barlow and you know, Elsie Tanner and Hilda Ogden and all these wonderful, strong women. So I started sending short stories to women's magazines, and this was in 2015 in December. And they started taking them, which I was absolutely gobsmacked. And I was getting paid for writing short stories. And one women's magazine, which I've got here, it's the People's Friend magazine. You might recognise that it's kind of it's for the more traditional end of the market, for the older lady. And they got in touch with me and said, look, we really love the short stories that you're sending in. And they knew about the Coronation Street books. And they said, how would you like to write the first soap opera for our magazine? Wow, so amazing. So this was 2016. And I've been writing the weekly soap opera ever since. So it's always in the back of the magazine. It's called Riverside. And I can honestly say it's the writing highlight of my week. It's funny, it's contemporary, it's not historical like my novels, and it's only 1,000 words, so it's just a page a week. And at the end of every page, I always leave the reader on a cliffhanger, so they're dying to know what happens next week. And after I'd written about 2 years worth of Riverside for the People's Friend, I bundled up a whole load of them and sent them to some agents in London and said, look, this will make a great novel. And every single one of them, without exception, sent it back and said, no, you won't. So I thought, oh, well, at least I've tried, you know. But then one agent got back to me and she said, it's not going to make a novel because you've got a cliffhanger at the end of every 1,000 words, and that's not how novels work. She said, but I love the way that you write, and I'd like to speak to you about writing something. So that was it. That's how I got my agent in London. And with her help, guidance and advice, I wrote my debut novel, which was Belle of the Backstreets, and that's on the banner behind me. It's the one with the brown cover and the girl with the long brown hair. And Belle of the Backstreets is about a girl who carries on her dad's rag and bone round. When her dad dies, he comes back from World War One and passes away. So I wrote a synopsis for the novel, and the agent said, I love it. She said, write me a chapter. So I wrote a chapter and I sent it down to London. The agent got back straight away. She said, fantastic, I love it. Write me 5 chapters and I'll sell it. So she actually offered the book to publishers and sold the book while I was still writing it. So I hadn't even finished it. And we had 3 publishers fighting over it as well. So this to me was a dream come true. I just can't express how much it meant to me after wanting to be a writer all of my life and not having any clue as to how to go about it. So I chose Publisher Headline, and they gave me a 3-book deal. And then I've since had another 3-book deal. So I've written 7 books for them now because they gave me an extra book deal after those 6. There's another saga to come, so there's going to be a total 8 so far. And then there's something else coming as well, which Pauline's going to talk to me at the end. Yes, so actually I can just see there's a lady joining called Caroline Sheldon, and Caroline is my agent. So I just say a special hello to Caroline for coming in. I really appreciate it. So basically that's me in a nutshell. I'm now writing sagas and another kind of book, which we'll talk about later. And I'm also continuing to write Riverside for the People's Friend magazine, which I absolutely adore. Yeah. So that's me. I couldn't be happier. I'm living my own dream. I know that sounds like a cliche, but I'm absolutely over the moon.
So, Glenda, how long does it take you to write your books?
It's normally about 3 or 4 months. I can sit down and write every day. And I write in the mornings. So about 3 or 4 months to actually get it out of my head, down onto paper. And then about another month editing and tidying up and moving things around. And then it goes off to the publisher. And then they send it back with some suggested changes. So you can either change it or just I'll take their advice and leave things, if I feel strongly that I want to leave things, then I can leave it. But so I think the process in total maybe 6 months from start to finish. And that includes all of the research all the way through to the publisher saying, that's it, that's great.
Has there ever been a plot line that you've really had to fight for, that the publisher wanted to take? You were really that it was an integral part?
I don't think so. No, I think because the saga genre, there are certain things that are expected in the genre, and certain things that you would definitely not put in. So I think I try to kind of be true to what I'm writing, so I don't put any scenes in there that would be out of place. So there's nothing. I'm trying really hard to think if there's any scenes that I've had to take out, but I don't think so. No.
That's great. So obviously your books, you have to do an awful lot of research. How do you go about that, and how long do you have to research a book before you actually start on it?
Well, the research is my favourite part of the whole process. Honestly, I absolutely adore it. Spending time in libraries like the Word at South Shields, spending time at archives and museums. I always spend a day at Beamish as a reward for myself at the end of all of the research. Absolutely love it. So I think the research takes about a month. I always allow myself a full month. Sometimes it only takes 2 or 3 weeks, and sometimes it might run on a little bit. But yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it. And speaking to people in heritage societies, I'm a member of Sunderland Antiquarian Society. Obviously in lockdown, I've not had access to any of those things, and I've had to do a lot more research online. So it's paying for services like the British Newspaper Archive, and and various things like that. So you can do it. You can still research historic documents online, but it's not near as much fun. And because all of my books are set in Riot, with the village that I was born and bred, I consider a walk around Riot every time that I write a new book. It's part of the research. I try to walk around the village from top to bottom, in my heroine's shoes. So I'm thinking, what would she be doing if she was walking down this street, and where would she be going, and how would she be feeling when she walks past the church or the old cinema? That's an integral part of the research as well.
Sounds fascinating. What's been your hardest scene to write?
Oh, in The Girl with the Scarlet Ribbon, which was my 4th book, there's a shipwreck on Riot Beach. And that was a bit tricky to write because people died in the shipwreck. And I'm not giving any spoilers away for the story. And it's an integral part of the book. After that shipwreck, what happens on the shipwreck, and who actually turns up to help and who doesn't, changes the book. So the shipwreck was quite difficult because I had to imagine it from a historical point of view. But the great thing is that I had all the details of the ship that I was writing about, and I knew what it looked like, and so that helped. But yeah, the shipwreck was tricky.
Are there any plot lines that you've actually written out of your books?
No, I don't think so. I tend to plan quite well, not too detailed, because I always think that you need to leave room to maneuver and to the storylines to change as you're writing them a little bit. So I'm usually pretty organised with where I'm going. So yeah, and I tend to know what I'm doing when I sit down to write. So I don't write anything out that I shouldn't.
How did publishing your first book change your process of writing?
Oh, that's a good question. I think when the first book was the first time I ever worked with a publisher and an editor, and I had no idea what was expected before then. But after the first book, I knew that when I was writing, I needed to put in more emotion at certain places. I've just seen my editor join the Zoom, because I just want to say a special hello to Kate Byrne, because I'm just about to talk about Kate. She's gone. Oh, there she is. Yeah. So yeah, after the first book, Kate Byrne, who's my editor at Headline, I've got Kate's voice in my head when I'm writing now, and I know she's saying things like, "Glenda, put more emotion here. Glenda, put a bit more tension here," because now I know how, what's needed. So I feel like I've got Kate sitting on my shoulder, which is great. I mean that in the best possible way. So that's how it's changed.
So we've got to talk a little bit about your characters now, because they're really full of life. I do love them. How do you choose your characters' names, and how do you come up with their personas?
I choose the names when I'm doing the research. I collect names. I've actually got a book that I collect names in, because you need names from the era, which is at the end of the First World War. So there's lots of Freddies and Jimmies and Davies, and the women are Molly and Dolly and things like that. Sadie and Meg. So yeah, I've got a book that I collect names in, and I just get them from books that I'm reading about at the time. It sounds a little bit morbid, and I don't mean it to, but also if I'm walking through graveyards and I see names on graves of people who lived at that time, you'll see the common names coming up over and over again. And so they go into my book, because I just think you need to be true to the times that you're writing about. I couldn't put Tracy in, for instance, not in 1919, because it wasn't a very common name, but a Dolly or a Meg or a Molly, they definitely go in. And the personas, Well, I always start with the strong women. I always start with the heroine and then think about the women that are around her in her life and how they affect her and their strengths and weaknesses, and then the men as well. And I don't quite know how the characters come to life. There's a bit of magic there that I still, perhaps it's best not to know how they pop into my head. But once they're in there and once I start writing a book, they don't leave me alone for months. So when I do finish writing a book, it's actually quite emotional when they all go, and there's a part of me that doesn't want them to go, but I have to, you know, wave them off, and then I start all over again with a new family, a new heroine, a new cast of characters. It's great. It's great fun.
Do your characters ever take on a life of their own and sort of surprise you with what they're doing?
Absolutely, because even though I plot and plan as much as I can, once I start writing characters, they will do things. Oh, I'm saying they will. I'll start writing things for them that I didn't expect, because the characters develop as you're writing them, and they respond to the things that I throw at them in different ways. Yeah, so they do. They all take on lives of their own, which is great. Absolutely.
I know it's like asking you to choose a favourite child, but who's your favourite character and why?
I'm very fond of in The Tuppenny Child, which is my second book. It's about an outsider to Riot. She comes in and she doesn't know anyone. She's got no money. She's got no friends. So everyone treats her with a bit of suspicion. And I do like that character very much, because she becomes the first woman in the village to wear trousers and to ride a bike. Yay! And she sets up her own business as well. So yeah, she's just really, really strong. So I do like her a lot. But in The Paper Mill Girl as well, I'm very, very proud of The Paper Mill Girl, because she acts as almost the unofficial kind of, there weren't any recognised trade unions for the young girls in the mill at that time, but if they're, you know, she does stand up for the other girls. I'm very proud of Ruth.
So you've just mentioned The Paper Mill Girl, which leads me wonderfully into my next question. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
This is the new book, Paper Mill Girl. Again, it's set in Riot, which is where I'm from. And then I started thinking, where could, if a girl lived in Riot, where could she work if she worked outside of the village? And she would obviously have to walk somewhere. So I walked from Riot to the old paper mill site, and it was doable. It took about half an hour. And I thought, yeah, I'm going to set this book in the paper mill. That's where she's going to work, and she'll live in Riot. So it's about this girl called Ruth, salt of the earth. She'll do anything for anybody. And she works really hard at the mill, where her work gets noticed by those higher above her. And she gets tasked with doing something very dangerous that changes everyone's lives. So I don't want to say too much and give too much away, but she's a cracking heroine. She's absolutely fantastic. Normally when I finish my books, like I say, I'm quite sad at seeing the characters go. But for Ruth, the paper mill girl, I felt like I wanted to give her a brass band send off and march her down the colliery bank, and everybody waving and cheering her, because she's absolutely fantastic.
I agree. I think all ones are fantastic as well. Do you think you could do just a little short reading from the book, just to whet people's appetite?
Yeah, I'm going to read. It's just one page I'm going to read, and I'll tell you, I need to put the scene in context a little bit first. Ruth works in what was called the rag room, or the cutting room at the mill, and it's where raw materials of clothes, all clothes, used to be brought into the mill. And these young girls in this rag room, their job was to slice up the clothes. That's what they did, 12 hours a day. There was no ventilation in the room, no windows, there was dust everywhere. It must have been horrible. So she's working in the rag room. She's been noticed for her hard work and her diligence and for looking after the other girls. And her supervisor is called Miss Wagstaff. Now, all the girls call this woman Waggy because they don't like Miss Wagstaff. She's a real harridan, so they call her Waggy. And Waggy tells Ruth that she's the new owner of the mill wants to see her. It's very unusual for one of the young girls to get called to see the mill owner. So I'm just going to read one page where Ruth leaves the rag room to go and see the mill owner. and then we find out a little bit more about her. But I'm not going to tell you what he says to her when he meets her, because on that moment the whole book turns. I don't want to spoil anything. So here we go. It's not very long. So she's walking from the rag room to the mill office. As she neared the office, her heart skipped. Ruth had been into the mill office many times, all the girls had. It was where they collected their wages every Friday afternoon. But she'd never had to go further than the wages office on the ground floor. She took a deep breath and knocked on the door. There was no answer. She knocked again, and a voice yelled, "Are you deaf? I said come in." She pushed the door open and was met by a stern-faced woman she recognised as Dorothy Smith, one of the clerks. "I've been sent to see Mr. Hewson," Ruth said. She barely recognised her own voice. She was shaking, and yet her voice sounded confident, strong and calm. Dorothy raised an eyebrow. "And who are you?" "Ruth Hardy." "Oh, he's expecting you, 4th floor," Dorothy indicated with her hand. "The stairs are through that door. Take them one at a time and don't run." Ruth headed to the stairwell and began to climb. At each landing was a wooden board showing the number of the floor she was on. On the 4th landing, she paused and swallowed hard, still nervous. At the end of the corridor was a white painted door with a sign reading, "Mr. Hewson, Grange Paperworks." This was it. She glanced back along the corridor, but there was no one to be seen. Her anger towards Waggy had given way to a strange curiosity about what and who she would find behind the door. But she was still scared, afraid she was about to be given her marching orders. She took a moment to calm her racing heart, then knocked hard on the door. She leaned close, listening. There was silence. She was about to move closer when the door swung open and she almost fell into the room. In front of her was a tall, thin man with white hair. He wore a grey jacket and matching waistcoat over a white shirt and black tie, and in the lapel of his jacket was a delicate pink rose. "Ah, Miss Hardy, I've been expecting you," he said. So that's all I want to read, because that meeting of Ruth and the owner of the mill changes everything in the book. So, and it's not a romance. It's nothing as obvious as that. There's a lot of danger involved. And that's all I'm going to say.
Ooh, that's definitely teasing with that, Glenda. That's brilliant. Mentioned earlier that you've got a new 3-book deal as well, which is totally what you normally write in. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I'd love to. Yes, when we had lockdown last year, you know, I had so much time on my hands, like everyone probably did, that I turned the book into Headline, the saga that I was writing. I turned it in very early because I was able to write a lot more than I ever had before. So I was kind of twiddling my thumbs in the summer, had all this spare time. And I'd won an award for a short comedy play that I'd written. And because the weekly soap that I write for The People's Friend is also a bit funny as well, I always had it in my mind that I'd quite like to write some humour. So I, with the help of my agent, Caroline, we worked on a synopsis together, and I wrote a cosy crime novel, which is set in Scarborough in a bed and breakfast. And it's about a group of 12 Elvis impersonators called Twelvis. And one of them ends up dead, and his blue suede shoes are missing. And we've got a bed and breakfast landlady called Helen Dexter, and she's got a rescue greyhound called Suki. So Helen and Suki are the sleuths and the heroines of the book, and they're the ones who solve the crime. So Headline very much enjoyed it and gave me a 3-book deal to write Cozy Crimes. So what this means is that I'm now writing sagas and cozy crimes alternately for the next foreseeable. So couldn't be happier. It's a wonderful contrast, and writing about Riot, where I'm from, for the sagas is fantastic. And then the cozy crimes are all set in Scarborough in a fictional bed and breakfast. And I absolutely adore Scarborough. It's where I got married, went on many holidays there as a child. So yeah, couldn't be happier.
That's brilliant. That's absolutely fascinating. So when will your next saga book be out as well? And can you tell us anything about that? Or have you not even started writing that one yet?
No, it's done. So we've got, so The Paper Mill Girl is out, the current one, it's out now. And the next one is called The Miner's Lass. And this one is very much set back in the coal mining community of Riot. It's about a girl called Ruby, who is a miner's daughter, and she marries a miner as well. So we're very much looking at the hardships that the miners' wives and families faced. And Ruby is probably the most innocent of all of my heroines as well. So when she meets this miner and falls in love with him, she thinks that's it. And she thinks she's found the one. And of course, sagas wouldn't be sagas without some ups and downs. Yeah, I very much enjoyed writing that one. And there's a lovely scene. I'm trying not to say too much about it. It's quite saucy and very funny, involving a miner in a tin bath. So that's all I'll say about that.
The mind boggles, Glenda. The mind boggles. I can't wait to read that one as well. What I'm going to do now is ask some of the questions we've got from the audience. And don't forget, if you are in our audience today, Glenda generously donated a signed copy of The Paper Mill Girl for the best question that's put to her today. So we've got a few contenders here. So the first question's from Paula Marie, and it says, "Are you Catherine Cookson?"
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Pauline?
She said, "Are you Riot's Catherine Cookson?"
It makes me very nervous indeed to just be mentioned in the same, sentence as Catherine Cookson. The similarities are there because we're both writing about the villages, the northeast pit villages that we grew up in. But I wouldn't ever dare compare and contrast myself against Catherine Cookson. If I was half as successful, a tiny bit as successful as she was, I'd be more than happy.
Oh, sorry, haven't unmuted myself there. I'll try that. Would you like to see your books made into a television?
Yes, please.
Series, and that's Stevie.
Yeah, I'd love to. Because you've got things now like Bridgerton and historical dramas like Gentleman Jack. So there's clearly a market for it. So if anybody's listening who knows somebody, that would just be amazing, absolutely amazing. I always have it in my mind that Melanie Hill, who plays Kathy in Coronation Street, would be perfect. But I've got her in my mind as Hetty Burden, the landlady of the Albion Inn that I've created. She'd be fab.
I agree. I think that would be really good casting. Next question. Do you still have friends in Riot, and are you recognised as a local celebrity?
I do still have family in Riot, but I go there quite often. And I do get recognised from people who know me because of the books, which is just amazing. But one of the basic things about coming from a pit village is that you're not a celebrity. It doesn't matter how well known you get. Whether you could be Madonna, and if you went back to your pit village, people wouldn't treat you any different. So no, I'm not a celebrity. No. But it is lovely. It's absolutely fantastic, actually, when people come up to me when I go to Riot and say how much they enjoy the books. And I think one of the best, well, I don't think I know, the best thing that's happened in this whole experience was when I was asked to go back to my old junior school to open the school library. That was a day I'll never, ever forget. It was just beautiful.
I think you are a bit of a celebrity, really, Glenda, really. Question from Lucy. Favorite song that you listen to while writing your books?
Sorry, Pauline, can you repeat that?
Yeah. Do you have a favourite song that you listen to while writing your books?
No, when I'm writing, I've got to have complete and utter silence. I can't have the radio on, the TV, nothing. It's got to be, I'm just fully focused in my head. But saying that, when I was writing The Cozy Crime, the one with the Elvis impersonators, before I sat down to write every day, I listened to an Elvis song. I found an Elvis song on YouTube that was relevant in very loose terms to the chapter that I was writing, to what was going on. And so that was a lot of fun. And I think I might try doing that again next time. It won't be Elvis, it might be something else, but it just puts you in the right mood for writing. But normally absolute peace and quiet I like to have.
That's great. I love Elvis as well. I think that's a great way to start the day. Last question I've got for the moment is, are the women in your books modelled on women you know today in terms of their personalities and characteristics?
Well, I always say, no, I don't know any of the women. No, none of them. But of course, they are influenced, I would say, by my dad's family, because my dad was one of 11. There was 2 boys and 9 women. And those aunties that I grew up with, I hope there's none of my cousins on this Zoom. A lot of those aunties were very formidable women. And I think a lot of that strength goes into some of my heroines. The strength that the debut novel, Belle of the Backstreets, about the girl who had the rag and bone round. When I was doing my research for that, I interviewed. When I was doing the research, the same photograph kept coming up of this rag and bone man in Sunderland, and the title that he was given was the King of the Sunderland Tatters, and the Tatters were rag and bone people. And I thought, now there's a title. So I contacted Sunderland Antiquarian Society and I said, do you know anything about this man? And they said, no, but we know his granddaughter. So I actually got to spend an afternoon with his granddaughter, and she was telling me about her granddad, who was the king of the Sunderland Rag and Bone men. And he sounded a real hard man. I mean, working outdoors in all hours with his horse. But when she spoke about him, there was a real tenderness there as well. And she spoke about his coat and how he always wore this really big, thick black coat. And that tough exterior with that coat, but this real soft interior, went into my heroine. So you can take a kind of a sense of a person, and what they'll say when you're talking to them might encourage you to go off and do more research. But I would never put somebody in a book that I knew, because that would be wrong. Absolutely.
That's great. So I've got a couple of questions about you as a reader now, because I always like to ask what you read, what you would recommend, that kind of thing. So the first question is, what do you read?
Well, I can read pretty much anything. I'm a huge Margaret Atwood fan. She's my favourite author, so I've read everything that she ever writes. I always go out and buy. I'm currently reading Michelle Obama's autobiography. I've been waiting for that coming out in paperback for 3 years. So I just bought it yesterday. I'm very excited to get into it. I love reading autobiographies of women who are involved in the media somehow, so DJs and people behind the scenes in television. But yeah, pretty much anything. I've just finished reading Lem Cisse's autobiography as well, the poet. It's absolutely heartbreaking. And I've just read a book called Strange Flowers by an Irish writer called Donal Ryan, which was beautiful as well. And that I would definitely read more of his work. And I've recently read Monique Roffey, The Mermaid of Black Conch, which was fantastic. And I'm a big Monique Roffey fan. I've read all of her books too. When you're a writer, you don't get that much time to read. That's the downside to it, because when I'm writing, I don't want to be influenced by other people's styles. I just like to fully focus on what I'm doing. But this month, the whole month of March, I've taken off writing. I've had a rest in between books, so I've been able to catch up on some reading, which has been lovely.
It is nice for a change, and I've read the Lem Cisse biography as well, and we were gutted because we had him lined up to come to the Word for the Riot Festival last year, but obviously with the pandemic everything got cancelled, so hopefully along again at some stage. So as a child, did you like reading, and did you use libraries, and what is your favourite childhood book?
Yes, I was an avid reader. I had 2 younger brothers, and there were 5 of us, like 3 children, mum and dad, living in a 2-bedroomed house, so it was pretty cramped. So to escape those 2 noisy brothers, I used to just go to my bedroom with a book, and that was my way of escaping and claiming a bit of independence in this very noisy, busy house. I used to go to the library a lot, weekly. My granddad was a big reader, so and he used to read westerns, cowboys and Indians and that sort of thing. And I'd go to the library every Saturday morning to change his books over. And if you're wondering how I knew which books he'd read and which ones he didn't, well, it seemed like the old men who read these country cowboy books and western books, they had this code that they used to put in the back of library books. So Granddad's code was like a green cross. So like I'd have to open the back cover of the library books and search for a green cross, and if it wasn't there, that meant he hadn't read it. So the back covers of the books were just covered in all sorts of marks, red stars, orange circles, and yeah. So it was going to the library once a week for my granddad to change his books that got me really interested. So I just went through Enid Blyton's Secret Seven, Nancy Drew's, Agatha Christie's, all that sort of thing. And my favourite childhood book, I've still got it. It's this little thing here. It's lost its dust jacket a long time ago. It's over 50 years old, and it's Enid Blyton, Naughty Amelia Jane. And the reason I love it so much is because Naughty Amelia Jane is a doll that's bigger than all of the other dolls in the toy box. And I'm quite tall, I'm a big lass. So I kind of had that empathy going on with her. And she's so naughty. I mean, this book, I still can't quite believe it, but she sets fire to the other toys in the book. So she's really naughty, but it's a book of short stories. And at the end of the short story, even though she's done all these horrible things, she's kicked and, set the toys on fire, by the end of the story, they're all friends again. And it's, she's redeemed herself. And then you open the next short story and she's off again. So it just kind of taught me the power of keeping a reader gripped and having that story arc. And I just love it. Yeah.
I loved Enid Blyton as well. Well, I was a Secret Seven girl, or
yeah.
Which one did you like best? Were you Famous Five or Secret Seven?
I was Secret Seven. Yeah.
No, Famous Five. You've mentioned obviously your childhood favourite book. What's your favourite book as an adult?
Without doubt, it's The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I've read it so many times. The copy of the book that I've got is almost falling apart. I really, really enjoyed it when it was on TV as well, until it got to the point where the fiction ended. The book ended, and then it went off into its own fiction. It started making things up. I stopped watching it then. But I thought it was wonderfully done on screen, on TV. And I've read it since. I just love it. It's one of those books I can go back to time after time. And Margaret Atwood is the only writer, I think, that when I'm reading her, sometimes what she's writing is so beautiful, it stops me in my tracks and I have to go back and reread a paragraph or a sentence because it's just so beautifully put together. So that The Handmaid's Tale is very special.
We've got a question from Glenda who says, I can't believe she's asking this. Do you turn down the corners of books when you read?
No, I use bookmarks. I've got my own bookmarks, so I've got no excuse. No, I try not to. My husband, I think he's still on this Zoom. He's probably cringing somewhere because what I will do when I'm reading a book is I'll break the spine, and he hates it when I do that. But I think if you're reading a book, and I refuse to have a Kindle, it has to be paperbacks. It's got to feel comfortable in my hands, and if that means breaking the spine to get it to lie flat, then I'll do it.
Good answer, Glenda. Good answer. Is there a fictional character that you wish you had created?
Oh, crikey. Well, I could say Harry Potter, because then I'd be rich beyond my wildest dreams. Blimey. I think something like Dracula, because that's always going to be part of our culture, because a woman had created Dracula as well. There's something very special in that book, I think. And again, it's another book I've read more than once. I think I've read it 2 or 3 times. But yeah.
I think we all wish that we'd created Harry Potter, to be honest.
Yeah.
Definitely. So your books that are set in Sunderland, are they based on any of your favourite places? And what are your favourite places in Sunderland?
Yeah, when because the books are set in Riot, when the characters travel into Sunderland town centre, as it was then, um, I always try and include the museum and Winter Gardens, which was the first museum outside of London, and that is one of my favourite places. I volunteered there for 2 years and learned a great deal and made some really nice friends. So I always try and include the museum and Winter Gardens. And just harking back to a different era in the books as well. So I try and include the bin store, which is now a Wilko, but it was such a beautiful store in its day. Just things like that. Mowbray Park with the lakes and everything. Yeah, so
Great, it's lovely. The whole sort of northeast coast's fabulous, isn't
it
it?
is. Yeah, yeah. Oh, I always include the beach as well. Obviously, Riot is on the
Yeah.
beach, so I try and include the beach in all of the books because Riot Beach is very dramatic. It's got these very high cliffs. So whether it's a shipwreck that I was talking about earlier, or whether there are lovers canoodling in the caves, or whether people just go to the beach to escape and try and clear their heads, or whether they get into trouble when they're swimming, the beach always plays a part in the books.
You've sort of touched on this earlier as well, but how has the pandemic impacted your writing?
It's it's had quite an amazing effect, I think, just because I've had much more time to write. So I've ended up with the cozy crime books as well, which is just amazing. Um, yeah, it's the freedom to have the time to fully concentrate, which I really enjoy. But saying that, the downside is, of course, that I haven't been able to get out and about and do any research. So I'm kind of reliant on what's online, which is good. It's all there, but there's nothing that beats being out, going for a date Beamish, or when I'm at Beamish, you can smell the coal smoke in the air, and you can imagine your heroine walking around these different areas, seeing the old material through the shop window, being in the sweet shop and smelling the sense of the toffee and things like that. So I miss all of that. I miss all of that sensory experience to put into my books.
Definitely. I think it's been really difficult for everybody, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And what about coming out and doing events and things like that? Has that been totally different in the pandemic for you?
Yeah, I've been doing a few Zooms like this, which is great. And it's wonderful to see people without masks on, and just to know that people are still very interested in books and in sagas and in me. So it's lovely. Yeah, it's a different way of doing things, but I am looking forward to bookshops reopening again, and seeing people and meeting people. Yeah.
I've just got one final question for Glenda. So if anybody else has a question they want to ask, if you could please type that in now, that would be brilliant. But my final question is, if you could tell your younger writing self anything, what would it be?
I think it would be, well, see, my younger writing self was on a council estate in a pit village, not thinking I could ever possibly be a writer because, I didn't know anybody who was. So I think the advice would be to reach out to others, find other writers, just somehow, remember the English teacher that told me that I had a bit of talent, and reach out to them and just I don't know, take advice from as many people as possible. Anybody that showed the slightest bit of interest in my writing, reach out to them and say, can you help me then? What do I do next? How do I get this poem published in my local paper? Or how do I get this story in a magazine? Because those things back then just seemed like they would never happen to someone like me. And yet here I am with 11 books, 11 books, and couldn't be happier.
A lot more to come in the future as well, Glenda.
I hope so.
Oh, we've got a question from Sandra. Are there any other genres that you might want to write in the future?
I think the cozy crimes are ticking all of my boxes at the minute because they've got humour, there's a mystery, and they're set in Scarborough, so I've got fantastic location, fantastic heroine to write about, and some fun things happening while at the same time there's a murder as well, so there's a bit of dark and mystery going on. So I think I'm fine for now. I think if there was one other genre that I'd like to go into, it's just a bit more humour, but because they're in the cozy crimes, and I do put bits of humour in the sagas as well. I think I'm fine. I'm concentrating on what I'm doing now. Yeah.
Great, that's wonderful. Well, Glenda, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you this afternoon. We do have our competition winner to announce. So, Tom, do you want to unmute and tell us who you think the competition winner is?
Yeah, I think it should be Lucy for a question about the best songs to write to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. That was a really fun, and I've got all of these Elvis songs going around in my head now as well, so that's brilliant. Lucy, if you just stop on at the end of this, we can get an address off you, and then we can get the book posted out to you. But thank you to everyone for coming. I hope you enjoyed. Obviously, you did enjoy this afternoon with the wonderful Glenda. We've got lots of other events on the Word's website, and hopefully, Glenda, will have you back in the Word when we can have people in our buildings again. It would be
lovely. Thank you very much
marvelous
for having me. It's been great. Thanks ever so much.
And really looking forward to the cozy crimes coming out as well. They'll be really good. So thank you all again, and do join us on another one of our events. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks. Oh, thanks, Michael.